There you go. You did it.
Great.
Awesome. So what we're going to do, I'm going to first have everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to keep this pretty informal. Please interrupt each other. Students, please interrupt us. Our panel is to help you. It really is about how can we share our journey to make your journey a lot better. So my name is Lisa. I manage the STEM outreach program at iRobot. So everything that has to do with inspiring students into the world of STEM. And we have a very broad definition of STEM because people who have non-technical careers work at a tech company. They are working in the STEM fields. My background is engineering, but I've been at iRobot now for about 11 years. And this is really my passion. And this panel is one of the most fun things that we do. So if you guys just want to go around, jump in and tell us who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the heart of it. Don't make me call on you.
I'll start.
Oh,
Thanks.
go ahead, Lori.
Okay. So my name is Lori Trachtenberg, and I am a senior product manager at iRobot. I have more of a business background. So I started, my undergrad is from Babson College right down the street. I actually live in Natick right down the street. I then went on to have a career at Bose Corporation for 20 plus years. We'll just leave it at that. But during that time, I also pursued a certificate in program management from BU. So that was like sort of my add-on schooling. And my background more so is probably business. And right now my focus at iRobot is really business management. I do new product management and sustain, which is like existing product management. And so all the so what's great about my role is I get to look at all the different aspects of the business, whether it's finance, accounting, what else? Logistics, supply chain. So, and the list goes on. And then also just defining products on the upfront, on the front end. And we have a whole development process called the IPDP, which is iRobot product development cycle. So that's sort of like where I come from. I'm a mom first and foremost. And my son just started Elon University in this at the end of the summer. So if you're a freshman, I sort of get where you're coming from. And I'm sure, you know, if you're not calling your parents, it's probably a good thing, right? Because you're making friends and having fun. So I'll pass it over to whomever said that they would go next.
I can go next. Hey, everybody, I'm Lauren. I am a researcher at iRobot. I have been at iRobot for 4.5 years, something like that. And prior to this, the majority of my career has been in user experience design and then fully into research. I started doing work in government contracting, working with the military on nonviolent cross-cultural communication software, and then moved into the business world and then ended up at iRobot. But that isn't what I studied. My undergrad is from Sarah Lawrence College, so no longer a women's only school, but we were at one point. My official degree is just in liberal arts, Bachelor of Arts. What we call concentrated, because Sarah Lawrence doesn't do majors at all. So I concentrated in social psychology and cognition, and then I went on to kind of dip my toes into laboratory work at a university to see, like, I think I want to go get a PhD. So I was a research assistant, and it turned out that that was not where I wanted to be at all. I was miserable. So I ended up deciding that I didn't want to do that, and then had a total crisis and had to figure it out, and was looking for kind of anybody who wanted someone with a psychology undergrad degree, and ended up in user experience. And then I went back to school while I was working, went part-time and ended up getting a master's in human factors and information design at Bentley. Not because I needed a degree to do my job, but because I really love learning, and the company I was at had a really great reimbursement program for classes. And I wanted the background of how to tie my research to the business needs. So I was able to kind of build that knowledge base from my degree, but it definitely was a thing that like I just wanted to do. It wasn't required to be in the field. So definitely a squiggly line path, went in for creative writing, moved through history, and then ended up in psychology, and then ended up in user experience. And now I'm an iRobot looking at robot behaviors and people and how we think about robots, and it's a lot of fun.
All right, I guess I'll jump in to round out the Lori, Lauren, and Laura. So I'm Laura. I manage the enterprise data science team at iRobot. I've been here about 4.5 years also. And my path went always from the robotics side of things. So I did first robotics back in high school, if you're familiar with that program, and knew I wanted to go into robotics, but didn't know what major. Ended up doing computer engineering in undergrad. And then took a year off between undergrad and grad school. I actually knew that I wanted to do a PhD and get into research. So I had that all kind of lined up, but I took a year off and studied in France for a year auditing, which was really awesome because there was no stress of like grades. You could just do things for fun. And I went through my PhD at CMU. Straight out of my PhD, I hired at iRobot. But I've taken sort of a circuitous route at iRobot, starting with as a robotics research scientist, then managing a machine learning team, and then switching kind of over gears to data science and learning more about the business side of the company. So that's what I'm doing now.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Sid Sharma. I'm actually a recent addition into iRobot, about 3 months in. My charter is digital architecture and data. And Laura is a great partner of mine, a customer of mine. I mean, on the engineering side, and she basically is responsible for making sense of that data. So I have a similar to Laura, I have a master's in computer science and engineering from University of Mumbai, and I've been in this area for many years. I lived in Natick as well for a little while, but most of the time I spent in Porter Square before the kids, and now live in Needham, Massachusetts, pretty close to Wellesley College actually. And worked in a whole bunch of companies in this area, including BJ's, Staples, and some startups in the Boston area.
I'm Alexandra. I've been at iRobot maybe 3.5 years or so. I write robot software. Actually, these days I write less and less software. I'm a tech lead for a robot docking program, so I oversee a bunch of folks that do a lot of the work. I went to a community college near here, actually, Mass Bay Community College at first for a bit, because I went to school later on in life. I also had a circuitous route to college as well. Before that, I worked in California for an enterprise computer company, broadcast television, went back to school, went to UMass Lowell. Then I worked in power electronics in Andover, and now I work here at iRobot. I also live in Natick, which seems to be a common theme here. As I'm finding out that Lori lives 2 streets over, so I guess we were all here for the easy commute to Wellesley College, but yeah, so that's me.
That's awesome. So I think one of the first things to notice is, beside the fact that I picked people who all live nearby and had the same name, the path is not straight. And these guys have found their way to what they're doing in this moment and now, and it changes, and that's okay. And in college, that's going to happen. Your interests are going to change over time too. And you kind of find your way there. I mean, none of us could have predicted that we'd be working in robotics, or very few of us. And, you know, the field itself has changed. So that feeling of change is normal, and not knowing exactly what you're going to do when you get there. But take us back a little bit. So when you did start school, to my panelists, like, did it live up to what you were expecting? In other words, you came in thinking you wanted to do a certain thing with school. Did you get to do that right away? Or what happened? I know, I'm a civil engineer and I don't really build bridges on day one. But Lori, what do you think? Were you
I
gonna?
meant to raise my hand, but whatever.
It's okay. We'll
Okay.
go with whatever things come up.
Because I don't have that automatic, like if I raise my hand, it shows the icon. But so yeah, I was thinking back with the questions that you had prompted, and I went to Babson, so I obviously was interested in business. I majored in marketing and entrepreneurial studies back in the day when it wasn't really as like popular as it is these days. And I would say I started off thinking I was going to do accounting. And quickly, you get thrown into these classes where there's kind of core curriculum that everybody takes freshman year. Accounting 1, I think we had accounting 1 and 2, if I remember correctly. And yeah, it was not me. It just did not click. I kind of like have a memory of like sitting in a room and going, what am I doing? Like, this is what I wanted to do because I thought it was like the right thing to do. I would, it seemed to be a lucrative field. So that's sort of where I was going. I was like, okay, I want to get out. I want to make some money and, be part of the big, I think back then it was like the big 6 or 8 or whatever. So, but anyway, that changed quickly. I realized like really my sweet spot was marketing, and then also that entrepreneurial bent. So that's sort of, I knew kind of like my second semester freshman year, like accounting's not going to work. So that's sort of what happened undergrad. So I do have an anecdote too about my future life. Like, so once I had my career at Bose, I didn't come from a technical background, which I think when you're working in a STEM company, forgive me, Lisa, but a lot of times people sort of expect that technical background right up front. And I didn't really have that. I learned that, I earned that at Bose. And so then that's why I started to look at program management, because I wanted to sort of balance out that business aspect with the more technical aspect. And I thought that would help with credibility, etc. I think it did to some degree, but ultimately wasn't a route that I chose. I decided to stay within product management. But it's just, I guess, like the underlying message is, you can do things beyond your degree, like after school. And, after you graduate to sort of round out your career. I think even Lauren, you were just talking about that as well. Lauren started. And by the way, I work closely with Lauren, not most recently, but Lauren and Laura, and they're great partners for data that helps inform programs and projects that we're going to do for new product. So shout out to them.
I think also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say that I'm impressed that you figured out the major in the first year. I didn't figure out until like my 3rd year that I was probably in the wrong major. So I was in computer engineering, which at Georgia Tech turns out is exactly the same as electrical engineering, except one extra discrete math requirement. Yeah, so I did a lot of circuits and things that I didn't really think I wanted to ever do again. I do remember thinking at the end of the class, some of the classes, like, if I ever have a job where I need to know this information, I'm going to immediately quit. So I had to slog through a bunch of topics that were not really of interest to me. And about my junior year, I thought, oh crap, I should have definitely done computer science. And what I want to tell you is it's not too late. All I did was take all of my electives and computer science classes. My dad's a professor, so I wasn't too intimidated talking to professors. They're like regular people. So there were some classes I wanted to take where I didn't have the prerequisites. And you can really just email the professor and tell them that, and they will happily, from my experience, in the most part, they'll happily waive, prerequisite requirements if you can show that you're going to be successful in the class. So I just stuck it out. That's what I did until the end of the year. But you can still definitely take classes that are exciting and interesting to you if there's enough flexibility in your schedule.
And I was going to add to what Lori said about like not having the tech background. I think I also don't have a tech background. Like psychology is science, but like that's a very different thing. But I think something that's very true in tech, and I would say also in a lot of other STEM fields, is that there can be a lot of homogeneity where you end up with a lot of people with the same background kind of coming at things in the same way. And so there's a lot of value in being somebody who is confident sharing your experience or your opinion, especially when that is different. And so for what I do, user experience, and I think also for anyone who's working in product development, like Lori, being able to be the person who says, like, I do not understand our app. Can we figure out how to make this easier for people is really valuable. Like we need those voices. Like my whole job is to find those voices and bring them into the company through research. But like even internally having those people is really good. So just because you don't have the background that everyone around you has doesn't mean that you don't belong there. It just means you're serving like a very important purpose. And I think that's been a thing I've had to learn as I moved through tech, which is not where I expected to end up.
But I think it's also like just the confidence that you have something different to bring to the table and ensuring that people understand that. And you might have to do a little bit more like convincing, you know, that it's the right thing or that you're the right fit. But ultimately, you know, if you can find that little kind of like niche or crack, you can say, hey, this is what I bring to the table. Like I might not have like the PhD that you're looking for or the, you know, but well, maybe not PhD, because I know that that's a pretty highly respected credential that people would be looking for. But you know, just like not having the technical background, I think that's why one of the reasons I got the other certificate was just so that it shows that I have some technical capability. And I think maybe at Bose that wasn't as critical, but I think outside of Bose and coming to iRobot, that was, it just showed that I did have that understanding at least of like the technical aspects of project management. Maybe not robotics, but you know, being able to get things done in a more technical environment.
Your skills are going to be what your skills are, and you want to play to your strengths, which is what these guys are saying. I do have an engineering degree, but I can tell you right now that I took one class in electrical engineering, circuits one, made it through by the skin of my teeth. And now I work in a robotics company. And I do not understand half of the things that people are talking about, even though I have that, you know, professional engineer after my name. And so what Lauren said is accurate. You have to be able to say, I don't get it. You know, what do you like? Some of the engineers that I have been in meetings with for different projects that we were doing for STEM, for instance, they know now to look over and they're like, uh-oh, her eyes are glazing over. Somebody help her. She's lost, you know, and let's explain it differently. The ability to explain things in many different forms is critical to being in a tech company. That means if you're in finance, that means if you're in accounting, if you're in product management, all those things are going to require you to explain those things and be able to communicate. So I don't know if you guys want to elaborate a little bit on the communication skills that you find come into play. But I think that's a critical piece to that technical versus non-technical background. Do any of you find yourselves in that situation a lot?
I mean, I work with non-technical people, and so I'm from the other end, right? Like I'm technical and I'm talking to people in finance and in marketing, especially who don't have that technical background. And I'll just echo what you said. Like I appreciate every time when they're like, okay, great, stop. What does that acronym mean? Why did you draw this conclusion? Can you go further? And, you know, it's been a really good gut check for me to make sure that everything I'm communicating is transparent, is understandable to all audiences. So, you know, it takes all sorts of the company, and it's really helpful to have all different levels of technical skills, I guess is my point.
We rely, you know, a lot. We're making a consumer product, so it has to make sense. So engineer A is going to come up to marketing lady B and say, oh my God, here's the thing I made, and it's going to be life-changing for this robot. And then say all these words. And somehow marketing lady B needs to now go to finance guy C and explain why we should invest in this thing. And then somebody has to go to the other marketing guy D and explain how we're going to sell it to a customer in language that everybody can understand. And Lauren's job includes making sure they actually understand it. We have to go back and ask, did we do this right? Because we can't just sell it that way. So there are infinite numbers of teams, you know, who have to interact and work together. And that's really what you're going to find too, is you're going to pick this career, but it intertwines with all these other careers, no matter what you pick. If you pick to be a vet tech, you're working with the veterinary, you're working with the surgical, you're working with the client. They all interact. But let's bring it back a little bit now, actually, to college and the experience that college was. So there is this impression that people go to college and they finally figure out what their major is and they glide right through and they get this piece of paper at the end and they jump into a career. And that is so not true, particularly in the more technical and STEM fields. But let's talk about college in general. Did it derail you at any point? Were there classes that seemed hell-bent on ruining your life and your career? Were there professors that obviously were there to wreck your existence? Because I think that happens a lot for students, but they think they're the only one. So let's talk about that. Did it happen? Does anybody want to share a story? Go ahead.
I struggled through my drafting class. I was just awful at it, and we had carpentry also in my first year, so I'm not handy, which is probably why I'm in computers. And I think somebody said you just stick it out, and it's what you're not good at is going to pass, and you're going to find your groove, and that's essentially what happened.
And just because you're, sorry, Alexandra, real quick, just because you're not good at something like in school doesn't mean that you're not going to be good at it afterwards. So I work a lot in AI and like machine learning. In undergrad, I was again a junior, took my machine learning class. I was in tears, like it brought me to tears, this class. And it was written in like Java programming. I felt really uncomfortable. I was taking with all these CS students when I was a computer engineer and didn't have a background. Well, guess what? Like I took computer science then as a grad student and I like aced it because struggling through that process made me like really learn it and talk to the professor. And, it was a really tough time, but it really got me to see that I wanted to work on that. And so just because you struggle through something in undergrad doesn't mean that you're not going to end up rocking at it, loving it, and ultimately doing a career in that if that's what you want to do. So yeah, I definitely struggled through that, but now I use that all the time. Alexandra, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Mine was similar. Signals and systems taught me to not be paid to do signals and systems. So I was like, this is absolutely terrible and atrocious. I will kill people if I do this for a living. So not intentionally, I should point that part out. But there was plenty of other classes that I really enjoyed and that I aced and was really good at. And I found like where I wanted to gravitate towards. But in the end of the day, a lot of these technical fields are also the practical application of science. Like engineering isn't just like, if you're a physicist, that's a separate thing from like an applied thing of those same principles. So if you're good at those things, you can find those interests, get through school, and have a means to an end.
Anyone else? Lauren?
I mean, so I ended up in tech by accident, but I will say, I think when I was in college and I was figuring out what I wanted to study, because I changed what I was concentrating in when I was majoring in like multiple times. I found myself by the time I hit my third year taking classes where I didn't have a particular part of the background that maybe would have been valuable. So like a good example here is I avoided math. I just really struggled with math all the way through school. And so when I got to college and I didn't have to take a math class, I had other ways of fulfilling that requirement. I leapt at that opportunity to never set foot in a math classroom again. And then by the time I hit my third year and I was working in a psych lab, learning how to use SPSS and needing to do statistical analysis on my data, I was like, hey, you know what would be helpful here? Some stats, which I had never taken, like in high school either. And so my final year of college, I ended up taking a statistics class. And because Sarah Lawrence is so small, they don't have a lot of like, I actually spent a year abroad at University of Edinburgh in Scotland, and that was a huge university, and there was like specific math classes for the psychology majors. So you only, you know, we're looking at things through a psychology lens and could learn exactly what you needed. I didn't take math when I was there because I was still avoiding it. So when I got back and I was like, okay, I'm going to take statistics now, my only option was to take the math class statistics. There was no like baby stats for psychology students. It was just you take the math. And so I had to learn all the theoretical background to like, what is a p-value? What is an ANOVA? What do these numbers mean? And I'm actually so glad that I did that, because now as an adult who works with other people who are not researchers, who don't understand my analysis, I can explain to them, hey, this is what this means. This is how we use it. This is what the interpretation process is like, in a way more robust way than I would be able to if I didn't know all of that background. So I'm glad that I ended up in that position. But also it turns out that like statistics in particular is a thing that I enjoy. And I would never have discovered that if I hadn't decided like, oh, hey, maybe I should go back and take this class because I'm missing this background. So I made it through. Like I could have avoided it, but I'm really glad that I didn't, because I ended up really liking it. I learned a lot, and it's something that I still use now. I mean, like I use a lot of math in everyday life, but that in particular is a piece that I'm glad I studied. And I, you know, that would have been a like 101 class I should have taken freshman year. I didn't. I ended up taking it at the end, and that was okay. I still got to do it. It would have been fine if I hadn't, but it was getting to do those like reflection moments really shaped a lot of my education in college.
Anyone else have a horror story that?
I just have a quick one. So, well, my first time where I was like, holy crap, I'm way out of my league, was I had to take econ. So we had to take micro and macro. Micro, I failed miserably. It was horrible, horrible. Macro, I was like pretty good at. And then also I remember sitting in a supply chain class, and I want to say I was like a freshman or a first year, like sophomore. Or first semester sophomore, excuse me. And I was sitting in a class with like juniors and seniors, and I dropped it. I had to drop it. I couldn't do it. But the irony is I do a lot. I work a lot with supply chain these days. We manage, you know, bringing new product in, managing inventory through the supply chain, and then also end of lifing product, which is a huge, there's a number of implications for when you decide to essentially discontinue a product, and the timing and how long it can still be in the marketplace, the support that's required, and then just like shutting everything off. And when you do that, and the timing and all that like boggled my mind back in the day, but you know, subsequently in both my Bose role and my role here, my roles at Bose and my role here, I'm more comfortable with it. And it's just one of those things, like, you know, previous speakers have said, is that, you know, you just sort of like roll with it, you get to learn. And even if you didn't have the class, like, it's okay. Like you can learn on the job and be okay with that. And there's a lot of support around you too, if you don't understand something, where you can go to them and be like, okay, sit with me, explain this, set up a meeting, what have you. So yeah.
So a couple amazing points. Sometimes you're gonna not be good at a part of the thing that's a part of your career choice. We all fail in some area of the things that we do every day. When, you know, Lauren, statistics clicked for her. We have another woman who was an engineer and then a product manager. She took statistics 6 times in college. 6. She had to pass it by that sixth one because she was at the end of her senior year and was not gonna, she's highly successful. So that just didn't click. I have absolutely no spatial relations skills. Okay, none. So Sid, I feel for you with the drafting thing, because the game here at my home is to watch me try to put leftovers away and see the size of the pot on the stove and then the container that I choose, because I just don't have the ability of 3 dimensions. When you take the class can really affect how you're going to do. A couple of you guys mentioned taking it and they were juniors and seniors, or they were the computer scientists and you were computer engineering. It really matters, because when you find yourself taking Chem 10, but your schedule coincides with when, all of the pre-meds had to take Chem 10, that was just not fair. So those things are going to impact how you do. It's okay. You can see everybody stumbled at some point with something. When I started doing this panel a bunch of years ago and gathered, it was mostly mechanical engineers because that's who I was mostly friends with and knew would do the panel with me. And I'm like, okay, guys, what do you think? And I think I had 3 guys and 2 women, and every one of them had just squeaked by in thermodynamics. So that's like an entire staff at iRobot who's saying that thermodynamics thing nearly took me down. It happens and it's okay. But what do we do? I guess that's my next thing, right? Like thermodynamics and heat transfer. So like I haven't found an engineer at iRobot that passed them both. But what did you guys do? Can we give these guys some hints, tips, tricks? How did you get through? What were some of your either academic tricks or mental health? Because that mental health piece is clutch. So what can we offer in that area for advice? Anybody want to start?
So I don't know what Wellesley is like, but we had a really awesome campus health center at Sarah Lawrence, and I was in a therapy group. Like we had mental health services that you could access. Strongly encourage you to seek that out. It was great. And one of the things that we worked on was managing stress. So not, this is exactly what to do, but like how to evaluate your own kind of mental state and what strategies you could then try to employ to figure it out and work through it. And that is a toolkit that has carried me through for many years, but also was really valuable when I was in school and in class. And one of the things that I learned doing therapy group was that I am somebody who does better if I can be held accountable, like if I can get social pressure to hold myself accountable. So in the classes where I needed help or like really was struggling, like bio and chem, I organized study groups so that I forced myself to study because I was with other people where we were all studying together, and I couldn't just put it off and watch a movie in bed and then fall asleep and never actually look at the textbook. So that was the approach that worked for me. But so part of that process was like figuring that out and then implementing it. And both of those were really important.
Anyone else have some thoughts on?
I don't know how appropriate it is, but in my case, it was if you did well or there was a happy moment, my group of friends was fantastic. We would just, let's go drink. And we would celebrate. And if somebody's family, somebody passed away, or we didn't do well in school, or we went and drank and out of sadness. And so that was our thing. So a group of friends and alcohol, unfortunately.
But that's honest. And I think the answer there is an outlet. And if your outlet is to go out and socialize with your friends, then do it. You can't avoid your work, but let's use the outlets that you have. As far as counseling on campus, it's free and it will never be free again. All of us are paying a lot of money right now for our healthcare services that we can avail ourselves of. So take advantage of it being free. Laura mentioned study groups, great way of kind of not only, helping yourself, structuring your studying, but somebody's going to have the answer. Somebody's going to be able to, go back and forth with you to find that answer. How about office hours? Did any of you guys take advantage of office hours? Or tutors?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes that'd be helpful. The other thing I was going to suggest is that different people have different learning styles, right? I had some friends who in the classes would get nothing out of the lecture. They'd be trying, right? Sitting there paying attention, really trying to follow, and just none of the information would be absorbed. But then they could read through the lecture notes or read the textbook and get a lot more out of it. There's a lot of really good resources online, even from other courses. So if you find that you're not absorbing the information like through the channel that you think you should, whether that's lecture or the textbook, like there's usually pretty good resources to supplement. And office hours can help to go and ask the professor too, or the TA if it's being taught by a TA, whether there's extra resources they can point you to. I found that to be helpful.
A lot of the professors who make no sense in class are going to be great one-on-one. Right. So go, and you're paying again for office hours. Go make use of them. Don't sell yourself short. And then the other outlet, for mental health is your physical health. And so, and of you guys on the panel, do any of you get up in the middle of the day and go for a walk at work?
I sometimes do. Wellesley College also happens to have an awesome path around the lake behind the school. I've walked it a few times before. So my school had spin classes as well. That was great to be able to go off and just have free spin classes.
At iRobot, you will see people, lunchtime, they're doing laps around the building, or, our buildings are big enough, we can just do laps inside the buildings. But take that mental break, because the problem set or the homework or the whatever that you can't solve, it makes so much sense when you go and give yourself a break. If that means going out with your friends, meet them at the pub for an hour and then come back and, see if you can solve it then. Maybe it's going to the gym, but this is a skill that you're going to need later too, as a way to kind of reset yourself. And same, with everything else that you do, just make sure you're looking out for you first.
When I was writing my undergrad thesis, and this is something I still do, but it really came into play then, was I find I work better if I switch locations periodically. Like if I'm only sitting in one place, I get distracted. And B, if I have to force myself to concentrate because there's other like noise and activity happening around me, then I really have to get into the zone to get anything done. And then I work better. And so every Saturday we would walk to the coffee shop in town, and we would sit, like I had a friend who was also writing a thesis, and the two of us would just sit together on our laptops, and we would get coffee like a couple of times, because we were there for like 6 hours, and we would just work on our thesis. And because we were in this like very active environment, it really helped me concentrate, not all the time, but like once a week. That was a really great space for me. And so that was something that I really enjoyed doing. I haven't done it as much lately given the pandemic, but I have a couple days like gone when it's been nice and sat outside somewhere and done it. Or like we have a coffee shop with like garage doors that open, and I've like gone there. So I still do that. It is harder with Zoom because the Wi-Fi is not good enough. But if I like have a day where I'm like working on data analysis or slides or something, then I can go and do that.
So I agree with Lauren and Laura, because they both said like just switching up your location. I think going outside, I find I sit too long at my desk, but going outside for even 10 minutes just gives me a different perspective. And you guys have such a beautiful campus, there's actually studies that say if you're in an environment with like an outdoors environment and looking at trees, that it does calm you. And it also like kind of, if you're, anxious or it's a reset button, just looking at trees, believe it or not. They've done studies on patients who were in hospitals, and their recovery was faster if they were looking out at trees versus a brick wall, which is a lot of times that way. So anyway, I think what I used to do pre-pandemic, unfortunately, was I had a morning exercise class that I would do that was like pretty consistent. So I think consistency and continuity with like what you're doing to sort of decompress or reset is really the name of the game. And I found that helped me a lot, like, because I would do my workout, which is just mechanical, but have my brain going in the background. What do I need to do today? What's up for the week? Like, what projects are coming up? Things like that. And then more recently, I've been kind of doing my iPad. This is funny. You can laugh at me. Computer coloring, believe it or not. It's literally like paint by numbers. For some reason, I find it super cathartic, but I have stuff going on in the back of my mind, like all the time. Like I'm thinking about work and thinking about what needs to be done or what my son might need at college or whatever. Like, so it's mindless, but at the same time, I feel like I'm kind of thinking about new things, processing them, and maybe thinking about things in new ways too, and other opportunities. So anyway, that's my boring life.
No, that's solid advice. And I'm going to counter you, Lori, with, or find the thing that takes your brain away from all that, the clutter, right? And all the things you're supposed to think about. I go to a dog handling class in the middle of the day. It's a half an hour. But if I don't focus on what I'm learning with my dog, then it's useless, because if I sit there and think about work, then she's not learning anything. I'm not learning anything. And she basically sits her ass down in the middle of the class and we do nothing. But it means I have to focus. And so I shut out the fact that I left Slack and my watch is buzzing. And, so for half an hour, it allows my brain to just take a break. And lo and behold, I can come back and I can send a much nicer email to the person who's annoying me, or I can solve the problem or figure the thing out. So see what works for you. That's what's critical. And then make sure you stick to it. And if it stops working, try something new. But college is definitely going to be a winding path. That job hunt is going to be a winding path. None of us, graduated college and when we went in as a freshman, said, I'm doing this so I can work at iRobot someday. It doesn't work like that. And so think about, what's going to be successful for you. I want to pause for a second to make sure that we get any questions from the students, if you have any, or if there's something we haven't hit upon. I know, awkward because you're the only two and we don't bite. Okay, you can always put something in the chat too. So we're not going to keep you guys, on here forever. I think in closing, we want to know, we're here as a resource as well. If you start your job hunt and you're like, hey, something you said really resonated, how do I apply that to my job hunt? Or I'm struggling with school because, how do I get through? Ask us. We're here to help. How do we adjust to the working environment after you finish school? That's a great question because it is very different. I know for me, the hardest part is like, there's no right and wrong answer. And it's kind of liberating that we're developing the answer. But do you guys want to address that? How did you adjust to the work world? Anybody? Lauren?
So I feel like when I got into the work world, I had to unlearn some bad behaviors. Not because I had, well, actually, okay. I stand by that statement, but I'm going to amend it and say that I am constantly reevaluating and thinking about how I'm behaving in the work world. I think one thing that I didn't know when I started that is very important to me now is that every company you work for, every team that you're on has a different work culture. And some of those things are positive and some of those things are not positive. And so being able to learn from your own experience and from the people around you and identify like what is a positive work behavior and what is not a positive work behavior is really critical. And coming out of, because I started out in working in museums, and then I was working in academia, and neither of those industries have reputations for particularly healthy work cultures some of the time. So I had kind of gotten all of these norms set for me that expected me to work very long hours and put in a lot of time when I wasn't getting paid, and did not have very good work-life boundaries. And so I kind of went into my first few jobs like thinking that that was what work was. And that meant that I didn't notice red flags in the places I was interviewing, that, you know, they were going to expect similar things of me that weren't good, or weren't, you know, were things I should expect better of, and look for jobs that would not ask me to do things out of hours and stuff. So I have learned over time, as I've gotten more experience, like what are the things that are important to me and my own work culture, and then what are the things that are just like basic table stakes for anyone to have a good work experience. And then, you know, to date, that's really been about like figuring out, how do I want to behave at work, and how do I identify jobs where I'm going to be happy. And now I actually just moved into a management position where I'm managing a team. And so now that's also becoming a question about what norms do I want to set for the people that I'm in charge of, where I'm establishing those norms. So I think that's an important thing. And some of it is like from you and the people you know, but also like I love Ask a Manager, which is a work blog, like etiquette blog. So like finding places like that are trusted resources has been very helpful for me. And so if that's like the type of source you like, I'd recommend it.
I think also in school, there's like a very clear criteria of what it takes to like get your degree, right? You do X, Y, and Z classes at whatever grades, and you have a few things you get to choose along the way, but it's kind of a predetermined path. But once you get into the working world, there's a lot more variation, and it's a lot more roll your own adventure, because there's different companies, different things, different roles within those companies. And then even if you're there at a role that you like, you're going to grow, and you're going to want to grow your career in different ways. And you have to navigate those waters as to where you want to go. Do you want to go into management? Do you want to stay technical? If it is technical, is it the technical stuff you've done in the past? Is it stuff you want to grow into? And there's no right or wrong answer to any of this, right? There's no like end goal and X amount of, you know, curriculum points you get to this point. It's very much like being introspective, being honest with yourself. You know, what do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? What are you comfortable with? And going from there.
It's very true. Any other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Can I ask a question?
Please do, yeah.
My name is Fang Wen. I'm a senior at Wellesley. I am a computer science major, and I am on the job search. So a lot of handling rejections right now is very relevant to me. I guess my question has two parts. One is that for you guys that have like a previous manager or previous company you've worked at, how did you manage to maintain a connection, or when do you want to choose to maintain the connection? And my second question is that when you have just received a rejection letter, is it worth it to follow up with whoever's interviewing you?
I would
That's
say,
a fantastic question. And I'm going to let these guys answer because I don't get to hire an interview, but go ahead.
sorry, I like jumped right in there. It's a good question. I would say for me, and I've been on both sides of this, right? Like I've interviewed and gotten rejected, and I'm also now like a hiring manager who's going through hiring. I would say for me, it depends on how far I've gotten in the interview process. Like if it's somebody that, if I've spoken to people and like made a human connection, then following up on that and saying like, hey, can you just give me a little bit of feedback about kind of, sometimes there isn't a good reason. It's just like you didn't have the right background or you weren't the right fit, but even just knowing that can be helpful. So I would ask if it's really early in the process and I don't feel like I have a person that I'd built a relationship with to reach out to, then I typically won't. From the hiring manager side, I would say don't read into it if you can avoid it. If you ask for feedback and then you don't get a response, I know some companies want to be very careful about not giving people feedback for like legal reasons. And also there are times where you as a hiring manager are concerned, like, okay, if I give this person feedback, are they gonna turn around and lash out at me or like argue with me about it? Like, you never know what their response is going to be. So some people are very hesitant to have that interaction. So it is not about you if you ask and don't hear anything. But I think if you've already built that relationship, you're more likely to have a positive response. I'll also add that, like, I actually ended up not at iRobot, but the job I had before iRobot, where I sort of led my first research team. I got that job because the HR recruiter at a company that I'd interviewed with, and they rejected me, called me afterwards and was like, hey, I have a recruiter that I'd like to recommend you to, like, are you okay with that? And so I talked to her and she gave me some feedback, and then she put me in touch with someone else. So it's always good to build those relationships, even if it's not with the hiring manager directly, because you never know.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to echo Lauren's point about not to take it too personally, because I've been a hiring manager for different teams, and we've hired a bunch of different people now, and there is so much that goes into that decision that is beyond just you as a candidate. It has to do with the timing of the role. Maybe the company decided to go in a different direction and close the role, or they already have somebody who they've been talking to and that they're ready to give an offer, and they're just, or have given an offer to and are just waiting to hear back. And you may never know what the situation is under the hood, but just know that it's not just, you may be very qualified for the role, and the fact that you get rejected from something, it does not at all mean that you're not a good candidate for that role. There's so many things that could be going on in the background. So I agree with what Lauren said about not necessarily reading too much into it. That being said, if you do see sort of a trend or get some feedback, if you have peers who are looking at similar roles, and you can get a sense of what strengths you're bringing compared to other applicants, that can also help guide you going forward.
I would just say too, I'm assuming that Wellesley College has an office where you they basically allow you to, or they bring in jobs, or have they done that at Wellesley? Okay.
Yeah, so actually that's my office.
Is that your group? Okay, what's the name of it? Sorry, I'm like,
so sorry. Actually, everyone got a chance to do a little brief intro but me, but I should have definitely maybe done that. I totally didn't realize it either until right now when you mentioned that. But yes, Alexis, I'm the career education advisor for STEM students specifically. So a part of my reasoning for coordinating this was because I feel like there are definitely so many resources out there that people can offer in terms of, especially, obviously a great tech company with such amazing people. All of you have done a fantastic job today. And I wanted to thank you all again for coming. Not to steal I'm going to give it right back to you, Lori, just real quick.
I know. I just
But yes, but if you did have like follow-up questions after this, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I do one-on-one advising appointments for 30-minute windows, and you can sign up for those through Handshake. But just wanted to shamelessly plug myself in there because you gave such a perfect little intro. But thank you so much.
Well, because I couldn't remember what it was called about. It's like the Office of Career Services. Okay. So, back in the day, that was like a key component of Babson, I think, was that they had a lot of outreach. Now it's like every school does the same thing, but use those resources as much as you can, and take the time to spend a half an hour with somebody, particularly like Laura said, if you feel like you're getting a lot of rejection, you're like, what could I do better here? I was just reviewing a resume, and one of the things that I saw, because the person didn't have a lot of job experience yet, right? But they had done some work over the summers. And what I saw was I did this, but it wasn't results oriented. So it didn't say I brought in X number of companies, or I, grew, was able to analyze X amount of data and this was the result. You know what I mean? So you kind of need to make sure you're finessing and making sure that whatever you're putting on your resume shows results. Even if it's a project that you worked on that you were really proud of at school, if you can show that, here were the goals and here's how I achieved them, and really explicitly say these are the results, that that captures people's attention, particularly with, what did you say you were, computer science or computer?
Yes, that's right, computer science.
Computer science. So anything analytics, like, yeah, that's what I would recommend. And your first question, was that about connection with the people, like when you get into the workforce, how you maintain those connections even beyond, like, say, if you move jobs? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, I guess what I meant was like for your prior employer, like who would you consider that you would fill as a reference? Like to what level of connection or performance would you say you achieved that you feel confident that your previous employer will write you a good reference? For example?
Okay. Yeah. So, funny story, the woman that I work for right now, we've known each other for 20 years because we worked together at Bose. So she was an advocate for me at iRobot. Thankfully, there were a number of Bose people at iRobot, so I was able to leverage those connections. But when I was looking for my job, unfortunately, I was laid off during the pandemic. So I had to reach back to, my friends at Bose and coworkers that I respected to say, hey, would you help me? Would you put a recommendation on my LinkedIn page? You're more than welcome to look at my LinkedIn page and check it out. The last name is Trachtenberg. But that's what I did. Like, so you kind of have to be shameless. Like if you have somebody, I mean, I don't mean that to be negative, but just, it doesn't hurt to ask, like, and try not to get it in your head. Like, oh, I haven't talked to this person. I talked to somebody that I hadn't talked to, I want to say in 16 years. I'm not kidding. 16 years when I was looking for my job. And just that, like, if you have a good feeling about somebody, if you worked with them, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to help. Like, so don't, let that get in your way. And then just going forward, like, if you can make it those connections, I wish I did this better, but just reaching out to people, maybe once a month, pick somebody on your LinkedIn list and give them a call and be like, hey, how are things going? So I would just say, like, try to maintain those connections. And that, I'm just an example of somebody that tried to leverage people that I knew and was shameless about going after somebody 16 years out that I hadn't talked to. And they picked up the phone, they spent an hour with me, they connected me with managers. And yeah, so I think, and there's like a few stories like that, but just saying, it's, you do develop strong friendships. I see that even though I've been mostly remote, there are people that I'm connecting with across groups. And I would hope that, if I decided to leave iRobot or they decided to leave, that we would still, stay connected, or have that good, I guess, that good connection that you could go back and dip in the well, if you will, and ask for a recommendation if necessary. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helped a lot. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Your network's going to really help you. And so start building that network, rely on people. Shameless is the best word for it because people want to help. It's in their nature, most people, to help. I mean, I got this job because the neighbor guy, like 3 streets over, he knew somebody in HR who he was able to call and be like, there's a resume on your desk, go find it, bring it to the right. Like, he had no stake in the game, but people like to help. As far as rejection, it's just keep going. You have to just keep going. It's not about, like everybody said, it's not necessarily all about you. It just happens. And that job, apply for the ones that are interesting to you. Don't limit yourself to the job you think you're qualified to get. One of the biggest problems we see with a lot of students is they underestimate and they don't just throw that out there and try for the job. So don't get in your own way, just go for it and ask us for help. These guys are all great. If you said, can you just take a quick look at my resume? Most of them would say yes, and they can send you back some comments. So
I was actually wondering, Lisa, if after this, if you wouldn't mind sharing everyone's email, I can send it to the group of attendees and make sure that we get that out to people. So
remind me and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Of course.
And we're also like part of your network now.
Right.
You know, you came to this, like, so you showed initiative and we're part of your network. If you linked in with us, I'm sure we would link in back with you, you know, and it just seems, I keep saying LinkedIn, but that seems to be sort of like the hub right now for connecting with people. And I do want to say that when I graduated, it was a really difficult financial time. And there weren't a lot of jobs. And I think that kind of framed my work environment and my career, probably at a detriment, you know, because you're like, oh my God, you'll take any job. You're in a good, one, you're in a great major, and two, you're in a really good market, even though I know everyone's saying, oh, you know, going into recession, whatever. But like that'll buoy you. Like, so I think you just need to, like, you know, stay positive. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and you know, just keep going for it. You'll land something that works for you, you know.
Or not. And if it's not
Or
the right
not,
job,
and if it doesn't,
move on.
something else. Exactly. And I wish I did that. I wish I did that more in my career. I did within my roles at Bose, but I wish I had done more outside of the company to get that experience. So you're talking from somebody with experience, you know, saying move around a little, you know. It used to be like, oh, you know, they were only at that job for a year or 2 years, you know, oh, what, you know, what's wrong with that? It's not like that anymore. It's all about like getting your experience, making those connections, you know, spreading out your network or growing your network. Like that's the name of the game these days. So take advantage of it.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
No problem. All right, you guys, this is awesome. I'm really glad we could do this. Alexis, thanks for all your help organizing.
Thank you.
Will have the recording distribute as you need. And then remind me, I'll send you everybody's contact information, and please, you know, have your students get in touch with us.
Thank you all so much for coming and sharing your wonderful stories. I really enjoyed hearing from every single one of you. This is absolutely great. Thank you so much. And yes, and to the students that are here, again, feel free to follow up with me also at any time. And if I send out these emails and you lose it for some reason, I'm happy to reshare them again, and reshare the recording is, on multiple different platforms as well. So feel free to reach out. Thank you all so much for coming.
All right, guys, have a great night.
Thank you.
Alexis, can you
Thanks,
stay on
bye.
for 1 second? I just want to have a quick question about neighborhood and Alexander, right?
Sure. Do we want to wait till they stop
Yeah.
recording?
Yeah, that's fine.
We can help. Let's help Alexis with how to stop
Yes.
recording.
Oh, I